Serious, if you could learn the truth of any one mystery, urban legend or conspiracy theory, what would you choose? What was before our universe? I probably won't understand the answer though. It hurts my brain to conceptualize this. Either nothing existed before or something existed and likely still exists. I'm not sure which possibility is harder to fathom. When my grandmother was actively dying, she gasped and said, "Bill, my grandfather who had already passed is here, and he brought a black lady." Then she died. All of us there were looking at each other like WTF. Hospice nurse here, seeing loved ones who have gone before them just before passing is extremely common. Often they reach out or point to a corner of the ceiling. It's usually comforting to the patient. Even in non-religious folks this happens. It's like they are welcoming them into heaven/afterlife. My dad did this kind of thing too. He was in a lot of pain and very distressed. Then suddenly turned to us and said, "My mum is here. She wants me to die now," smiled to himself and reached out like he was hugging someone and died peacefully. Honestly, it was the biggest relief knowing he was comforted and happy in those last few seconds. Had always been a mummy's boy and never got over her passing. Edit. Thank you for the similar stories, awards and just general loveliness. I don't talk about any of this stuff much, so this has been a shock to me. A man only a year older than me went missing in my town, right near my place of work a few years ago. He just disappeared. I remember seeing the missing posters and the police conducting searches. It has been several years, and he is still listed as missing. I think about him from time to time, and wonder whatever happened to him. I'd want to know about him. There are so many cases like his. I hope his family and the other families one day get answers. Similar story in my town here in the UK. Guy just disappeared on the way home from the pub in early evening in the summer, when it was still light out. They scoured CCTV in the area and tried to track his last movements, but never found him. This is why I think it's a bit ridiculous when you see the tinfoil hat nut jobs claiming that the government are tracking you. They couldn't even find a guy who went missing on his way home in broad daylight through a city center filled with CCTV and carrying his phone. The Caravana group, I think that's the name. Basically a group of 7 hikers start hiking the mountains when 6 of them start bleeding from the eyes, ears, nose and mouth. They all scream, start seizing. One even starts bashing their head on a rock. The remaining survivor flees, but later comes back to the bodies to get supplies. She's found a few days later, but refused to talk about it. A lot of people say it's a deadly nerve agent that Russia was using. This happened in Siberia, I think, but that doesn't explain why the last one survived. Even going back and still being unaffected. Sounds an awful lot like radiation burns and sickness. I know some other people died in Russia after straying too close to an abandoned RTG once used to power a radio relay out in the wilds. Dyatlov Pass vibes here. Which incidentally is probably the one I would want solved. I'd like to know what dinosaurs really looked like. I'm not even super into dinosaurs, but I've always wondered how close we are in our guesses. So I'm currently working towards a bachelor's degree in GAW/Conc in Paleo. And here are some tidbits I can tell you that I know of to answer your question with info as far as scientists know. 1. Birds are dinosaur. Birds belong to the theropods, of which T-Rex and Velociraptor belong to AMNH Berkeley. 2. Scientists have brought back a dinosaur. Click vanity intro. I know. But a team of scientists modified a bird's, I wanna say chicken, genes to give it dinosaurian features. Chicken dinosaur. 3. Several dinosaurs have been discovered nearly perfectly preserved. Borella pelta. 4. Multiple dinosaurs have had their skin/soft tissue preserved. Scientists have instances of soft tissue or even skin preserved from dinosaurs which can show what they may have looked like. See above as well. Edit. So to answer your question, as of now our best guesses are getting close to accurate. Guesses from the 19th century. Far off. Edit 2.0. I've noticed that the article I posted on Borella pelta is paywalled. So here's one that should not be paywalled. SDG. If it's paywalled, I'm just gonna link Wikipedia. The Yuba County 5 young mentally handicapped men went missing. They were gone for months without any clues other than a few mysterious phone calls saying not to look for them. Their vehicle was found up on a mountain road a few days after they went missing. It turned on and ran perfectly fine. They were finally found in a trailer deep in the mountains. The strange thing was the one full corpse that was found starved and froze to death when there was plenty of food, water and heat in the trailer to last all 5 boys a year. Some of the food had been eaten, showing that they hadn't had a problem accessing the food. While they did have impairments, they were all independent and would have known how to turn on the heat and get food. Call for help. To add the mystery, fifth man's body was never found, and while the others were cognitively impaired, he suffered from schizophrenia and had several disturbing incidents leading up to their disappearance. The full corpse that Cass found was wearing this man's shoes, but wasn't him. The corpse had been wearing boots the night they disappeared, and it's believed that the man either stole them or talked the other young man into giving him his boots. What happens to the 5th man? Why did the man in the trailer starve to death surrounded by food? Why did the other men leave the trailer and die just hundreds of feet away from it when there was food and warmth so close? Why did they leave the car to begin with? Why didn't they follow the trail back to the road? Now I'm wondering about this, and I've never heard this story before. Edit. I'm also troubled by the story. Also, thank you for the info, folks. But I want the answers to the questions he has. Wow. That's pretty creepy. Not gonna lie. I've never heard of this before, but it is fascinating. I want to know everything about the sea. I mean, it's so big. Who knows what new things could be there? Yes. I would love to know about every undiscovered creature in the ocean, even if it's terrifying. I want to know what's in the basement. Erwin Smith. Personally, I wanna know what the Catholic Church is hiding in their giant underground library. Books. Secret books. On a serious note, I think there are a lot of books by historical high ranking of the church that wrote down their thoughts on stuff like God, the Bible, homosexuality or some other somehow controversial topics, and the church is afraid to publish them because it would undermine their recent positions. Where's all the missing indigenous women from the Highway of Tears and other areas? Somebody must ducking know. You are more of an officer intelligent than an officer knucklehead to want to know the answer to this. My hands go up to you for bringing this up. I highly recommend supporting the Moose Hide campaign, whose mission is to end violence against indigenous women and children. I want to know what happened to MH370 or DB Cooper. I really believe Cooper landed safely and knew the FBI would not be far behind. He buried the money intending to retrieve it later. The police randomly searched the area as new leads came in. It was years before he felt it was safe to retrieve the money. By then he couldn't remember exactly where it was, since the darkness when he landed obscured most landmarks. Not to be a buzzkill, but we likely know what happened with both. There's strong evidence that the captain of flight MH370 committed an act of murder/suicide. He had been having personal troubles before the disappearance and ran several flights on his home flight simulator that were incredibly similar to the known flight path of MH370. Most likely he waited until a time when his co-pilot stepped out of the cockpit, then depressurized the cabin, which would have rendered everyone else unconscious in under a minute or so. With Cooper, the simple answer is that he probably died either during his jump or shortly thereafter. He exited the plane in the middle of a storm, with it still flying too high and too fast. Making matters worse, he was jumping over a forest and didn't request a helmet to protect himself from a rough landing. This would have been a borderline suicidal jump for an experienced parachuter, which Cooper seems not to have been. In addition to the oversights I mentioned before, he also picked the worst of the parachutes provided for the jump and missed that his reserve chute was a sewn shut training model, which would have been glaringly obvious to most skilled parachuters. Odds are good that he either wouldn't have been able to deploy his chute or else died on impact. If he did make it to the ground, he likely froze to death alone in the mountainous forests he would have landed in. What's more interesting to me is the question of who the hell Cooper was. He wasn't experienced with parachuting, but he did have extensive aviation knowledge which exceeded what someone outside of the industry would likely have known. For someone with that level of knowledge to go missing without anyone putting the pieces together is odd to say the least. The afterlife. To piggyback on this, it's the Rainbow Bridge specifically for me. The idea of being reunited with my cat that I had from childhood to young adulthood back in his prime. Knowing he has been looking forward to seeing me again after all these years gives me a kind of hope that I really can't express. I'm not particularly religious, but the Rainbow Bridge makes me wish I was. Where are the aliens? Tell me. Fear super duper far away. Like really far. And also, fear microorganisms. Who wrote the Voynich manuscript and why? And why was it written encoded or in an unknown language? I like learning about weird mysteries in history, and this is one that remains unsolved to this day despite quite extensive research through the centuries. I prefer the theory that it's an old D&D manual. Harold Holt, Australian Prime Minister in the 1960s, disappeared while swimming at the beach. He was never found. Always love the fact that there is a pool in suburban Melbourne called the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Pool. The bloke drowned for duck's sake and they named a pool after him. If we're going with Australian unsolved mysteries, I'd rather know what happened to the Beaumont children. Or, more specifically, who happened to them. Undertow. Solved. I gotta go with the first ever unsolved mystery that really made me think. Mystery of the Somerton Man. In the 1948, a guy was found dead on a beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was never identified, and months after finding his body they found a fake pocket in his pants. It was torn from a copy of the book Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I googled that, and had a phrase on it which said Tamam Shud, which means ended or finished in Persian. They found the book that it came from, but the owner denied ever knowing the guy. There was an encrypted message in the book that they found and it still hasn't been cracked. Apparently there's been a development recently that might identify him as H.C. Reynolds, but it's not 100% certain. It's super interesting. Edit. Thank you to you/young_old soul who has informed me that Tamam Shud actually means it's over instead of finished or ended. This one and the one of the two men found with instructions to take capsules and put on helmets are my two mysteries I want solved. Kudos if anyone knows what I'm talking about. I'll try to find the wiki for it if interested, but I don't remember the name for the case. Was creepy like this one. Edit. It was the lead masks as others have stated. Many have recommended the Red Web podcast, so you guys can recommend something else. So many rabbit holes to go down. What did they find in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947? Who killed John Bennett Ramsey? Who was the Zodiac Killer? What happened to Walter Collins? Who killed the Black Dahlia? Where or what happened to Flight 370? And these are just the top of my head. If I had a chance to sit and think, I'd have a lot more. 370 is the Malaysia Airlines one. Gots. The John Bennett Ramsey one just sits on my brain sometimes. She was born the same year as my little brother, so when she died it was so hard to not be caught up in it. It really bugs me that we still don't have a definitive answer of who did it. My grandfather one day just walked out the door and never came back. This was before I was born. I'm 27. He left behind my grandmother and his 3 children. There was a statewide search. My mom's family never got closure. Although, me thinks he might have had another family that he ran away to, but it still baffles me sometimes at night. My grandmother finally held a pseudo funeral / memorial for him last year. Edit. Wow. I did not think this would get so much traction. I appreciate everyone for chiming in. Thank you for the silver, kind stranger, and everyone for your interaction. My grandma's brother did this in the 30s, just disappeared. By all accounts, his wife turned very unpleasant, bordering on abusive. After marriage and divorce wasn't a good option in those days. My grandpa traveled a lot for work and supposedly ran into him in Nevada in the late 50s / early 60s. Grandpa worked on military contracts for his company, so he was all over the world until his kids were a little older. He said the guy would never admit it was him, but the bar the guy was running was named after him. His nickname had been Big Ed and the bar was named Big Ed's. It looked like him, and the guy knew a lot about their mutual hometown Chicago. Supposedly the guy specifically asked him to say hello to my grandma and her sister. My grandpa hadn't mentioned a sister. I keep trying to find record of this bar, but no luck. Never got a name on the town. No idea if the story was true or if my grandpa was trying to help my grandma get closure, though he wasn't the type to lie. I wanna know if they kept going at it with them culture thing and how they do it now, if it is What really trucks me up about MKUltra is that everything we know about it is because the government decided to release it. Imagine how much worse poop would have to be for the stuff they don't release. What deep sea creatures exist that we haven't found yet? Just how big is the largest squid out there? A giant squid washed up in New Zealand once and is now on show at the museum in Wellington. It's freaking huge, but not as big as I thought it would be. Fun fact, one of the people that stood in for Tom Scott on his most recent vacation agrees with you. TLDW. Statistical analysis suggests there are 6 more sea monsters humanity haven't discovered. Where sea monster means an oceanic critter more than 2 meters long. The earth is actually just a squid egg that hasn't hatched yet, so UHH pretty big. Lord, you said 1, and there's so many that I wonder about. Did the British intentionally let the Germans sink the Lusitania to bring the US into WW1? Did FDR have advance warning of Pearl Harbor, but did nothing? What really happened to Hitler's remains after he killed himself? What really happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald to cause her to sink? What caused the Moorgate crash? But probably above all else, the one I always wonder about, what happened to that kid I witnessed being kidnapped when I was 7? And my parents forbade me from talking to the police about. What happened to that kid I witnessed being kidnapped when I was 7? And my parents forbade me from talking to the police about. Excuse me? This man is wondering about the most common poop and just decides to end it with the most ducked up 2-sentence story. Damn, that last one is heavy. What's the story? What happened to that kid I witnessed being kidnapped when I was 7? And my parents forbade me from talking to the police about. If you give us the year and where you were at the time, any landmarks, what the weather was like, etc. Perhaps someone might be able to research it for you. Try r/RBI feed love to help you solve it. I really want to know more about this u/Kabufarks. Where is the nearest alien civilization? Probably within 100 light years. The vast age of the galaxy has allowed plenty of time for even a sublight only civilization to expand out and fully colonize it. You might be interested in the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter theory that both closely relates to this question. The extent of Jeffrey Epstein's network of pedophiles and who killed him. Is there treasure on Oak Island? The real treasure of Oak Island is the friends and the multi-million-dollar TV franchise we created along the way. The JFK assassination. Would suck to learn it really was Lee Harvey all alone. Who was Jack the Ripper? It seems like it was most likely some angry deranged dude from the local area who was eventually arrested for something else, or otherwise put away, or injured/killed. I feel like if we had a way of magically learning who he was, it would just be some random name we hadn't heard of. The Panama Papers, loads of wealthy people involved, and murders attached to it also. You should know there are loads of other equally large tax avoidance schemes that have floated around since basically forever. Panama was the one that leaked, but there are so many others. Who killed Libby and Abby in Delphi, Indiana in February 2017? This story absolutely makes me sick. Most unresolved mysteries involving children do, but this one has always stuck with me. It happened so recently and there's just no way this sick creep just got away with it, especially with modern technology. The girls' families are still actively doing as much as they can to work towards some closure. One of the girls has a sister who's very outspoken and has done a lot of work towards solving this crime, and I absolutely commend her for her bravery. I pray that this case is solved someday. Jennifer Fairgate/Fergate. It's a fascinating mystery. A woman checks into the Oslo Plaza Hotel, a 5-star establishment, and is found dead in her room 3 days later. Initially assumed to have committed a suicide. But there's no blood on her hands, no gunshot residue, no fingerprints on the bullets in the gun or the gun itself. Which, in addition to the odd position in which she is found on her bed, really starts looking more like homicide. Additionally, no personal belongings in the room besides clothes, shoes, a travel bag and an attaché full of bullets. Clothes and shoes have all producer labels/designations removed as well. Contents of her stomach indicate that she had died the day before she was found. But a member of staff who knocked on her door heard a gunshot go off right after that, indicating someone's presence inside. The door was also locked from the inside, but no one was there when they got in. Probably my favorite true crime thing. The second batch of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix has an episode on this. I wanna know what happened to Louis Le Prince, the true inventor of the film camera. Boarded a train, but never left it. No body found. It's highly plausible that he was murdered on the train and the body thrown off into the great unknown/rivers. It's not unusual back then for people to use common transport such as trains to commit crimes and conveniently dispose of evidence, since forensics wasn't that great and the word of a gentleman was taken on face value. We don't know if he actually got on the train. His brother is the only witness to him leaving for the train. Assuming he died, are we allowed to learn two truths about one mystery? Where did most of DB Cooper's ransom money end up after he jumped from that airplane? I believe the FBI lets you keep it if you find it, as long as you give them a chance to analyze it for latent prints/DNA first. Those bills must be worth a fortune to a collector. Even if they aren't, he'll still get tens of thousands of dollars in cash. Who doesn't want that? So, I get my name in the papers for finding Cooper's money, and I get a nice chunk of change to keep, a double whammy of good fortune. Years ago, someone found a bag full of the money they gave Cooper in a riverbank very near where they think he landed. The true age of the Sphinx, and its original look. Yeah. Was it originally a lion's head? What's in the chamber under it? Whether or not there is anything after death, and if there isn't, could we make something to keep you alive after death, for example something like in the show Upload? Where the mark my dad went. The second is the cure to cancer. Unfortunately there is no one cure for cancer. It's like a cure for viruses. There cannot be a single one, because there's a wide variety of cancers, and every single one is unique. That's why some people respond well to a certain drug and chemo, or radiation therapy, etc. Eventually, all the known chemo drugs are used, and if the cancer's still there and it can't be removed, you just try to make the patient's life as painless as possible. Stephen Paddock. The Las Vegas attack. I've always believed there's more to that story. He was a hardcore gambling addict, and as someone who worked at a casino for 4 years, I've learned that a lot of hardcore gambling addicts just aren't right. Not all of them. I knew some lovely customers who just liked being at the casino for hours every day, but there were so many people who had just lost touch with reality and were constantly angry that the casino was stealing from them. They took it personally when they were on a losing streak. I can easily see one of them just snapping, and am more surprised it doesn't happen more often. What reason Stonehenge was built for? It's a calendar. That's tough. Jack the Ripper and Andrew Gostin interest me, but it'd pick the Atlas Vampire. I had just planned my first date with a friend of a friend. He had recently come out to his friends, and we'd been friends for months, mostly talking online, since he was away often for his job. We went to an anime convention together, and he had already come out to me there. He gave the best hugs. We planned to go rock hounding on the mountain, then going to the local gem and mineral show a few days later. This was around the 4th of July, when he didn't show up for the mountain trip. We figured he was stuck at work. He didn't have cell service, and usually didn't get a chance to talk online until his long shifts were over. It was normal to not hear from him for over a week. 2 days later, and a day before the gem and mineral show, I get a call from the friend that introduced us. She tells me he died. Apparently, had been dead for an entire week because of his job. None of us thought he was missing any more than usual. We got together with all of the friend group to learn the details. They were in an excruciating order from which I'll spare anyone reading this. He had shot himself and was found a day later in a field heading out of town. He wasn't identified for over a week, since he didn't have any identifying information on him or in his car. He also was unrecognizable. The gun was his father's, but his father lived in a different state and doesn't know how he got it. His mom recently told him to take some old antidepressants because work was making him feel empty inside. He was not out to his parents or coworkers. He was dating my best friend's sister. He received a call while at work. His coworkers said he grew immediately pale and rushed out from work saying he had to leave. None of this was remotely what the person I talked to online talked about. We had one date before all this where he made me dinner. Seeing him in person was rare. He didn't leave a note. His family didn't know who he was, essentially. Their description of him was not accurate of the man I knew. My friends agreed, the friend who introduced us didn't go. There are so many unanswered questions in this mystery that makes closure almost impossible for me. Who called him? What was it about? His parents loved him, but didn't know the real him. I'm so lost. I don't know if this is comforting. But if he had just started antidepressants, those come with a black box label for suicidal behavior. There's a few theories as to why, but the first few weeks to the first 2 months of antidepressant use are very dangerous for this reason. Especially if he was taking them outside of the supervision of a doctor. Of course it's not his fault. He was doing the best he could do. I hope you find some peace. Is it possible someone tried to blackmail? His reaction was so extreme. Maybe he got a call about an illness. The Zodiac. I find it very interesting. And I want to know who they were. Same. My dad's high school girlfriend was kidnapped/killed by him. Freaks me out to this day. Not sure if this counts, but I really want a family tree of all living creatures from the beginning of life to now. From the first life form to every human being alive right now. It would be too large to print it. Maybe a very large PNG file in a godlike flash drive with infinite storage. He prepare for it to be dominated by decillions of microorganisms. The truth about extraterrestrial and maybe even interdimensional life. There's no way we are alone in a universe that is basically infinite. I would want to learn the truth around the Mothman and what people were seeing in the days leading up to the bridge collapse. I know about Mothman, but not a collapsed bridge. Personally, I think the Mothman was an owl. Especially if you consider how hard it is to judge the size of something you see in the middle of the night for a split second. Everything seems to add up to it not being a unique creature. Like how much a rumor can take hold in a small sleepy town. Or how it was originally reported as white, whilst later others say it was brown. Deleted. Nat Geo has a recent article about diet love. Why did Trump run in 2016? Was he really not expecting to win? Did he really say mucked when he did? Had been toying around with the idea for a while, decades even. Young Trump brings it up in a talk show, but said he'd only do it if the Republican Party went down a direction he hated. Him thinking he was livid about Romney in 2012 and then lost it when it looked like 2016 was gearing up to be Jeb vs Ted. No real mystery to it, Imo.